Welcome back, everyone, to STM TV, where we host a bunch of events, webinars, and so forth, talking about digital assets, tokenization specifically. But today we are going to take a little bit of a spin, talking about AI, its usage in digital assets, marketing, and PR. And we're joined by an expert in this space, Rob Gonda. Rob, how are you today?
Phenomenal. Thanks for having me, Jason.
Thanks for coming on. I know that there's a lot to go over. There's a lot of applications for AI in our space, as well as the broader marketing PR practices and so forth. But before we dive into any of that, can you give us a little bit of background on yourself and how you got into this space?
Sure, happy to. I'm a serial entrepreneur and intrapreneur, started and sold 5 companies, being everywhere from media to telecom to a digital agency. Sold it to Publicis, became McDonald's first chief digital officer, worked in private equity. And throughout my career, I've always been trying to find the intersection of emerging and disruptive technologies and business applications. So with that, I've been in the space of digital transformation, everything from computing to cloud to virtual reality, AI, which, by the way, I lecture at Singularity University. And over the past few years, heavily on data for business, which I bet is going to be pretty relevant to this conversation. And more recently, the explosion of AI, in part fueled through all my ventures on data and helping companies identify how to best utilize that.
Really interesting. Yeah, no, quite an extensive background. First CDO at McDonald's. I think that's huge. What are some of maybe the experiences that you've had transitioning from like a corporate world to more working with other individuals and so forth and companies that maybe aren't as corporate?
I had both an equal corporate service experience. On the corporate world, it's all about, the massive piece of corporate is influence, strategy, change management, updating corporate capabilities and internal capabilities. On the service side is helping the corporate at the end of the day move along their maturity and innovation and journey towards increased business outcomes and performance. So it's a great time to be in this space, because the reality is there's a lot of innovation happening, that there's technology hitting from every angle. Every company, from corporate to small to SMBs to startups, are looking at all this technology and trying to figure out what is here to stay, how do I adopt it, how that impacts my company, how do I ultimately utilize it to achieve a better business outcome. What is a POC? Who can I hire? What does it mean for me internally? What does it mean for competition? So there's massive influx of information. Everybody's asking themselves the same questions, and hopefully today we'll get a chance to discuss a few of them and see how it impacts specifically the real world assets, tokenization, Web3 world, and everything that we're going to discuss today.
Makes sense to me. And for anyone watching, please remember that you are able to submit questions through whether it's X, YouTube, or LinkedIn that you are watching this from. Go ahead and share it over to anyone that it should apply to and should be listening to as well. We'll take those questions as they come in. But in the meantime, this is a very broad area, the AI space. And I know that recently it's taken off because of ChatGPT and everyone's, playing around with it, but it's been around for a very long time. And with that, to your point, Rob, on analyzing data and getting insights into stuff, there's something to be said about getting a little bit more specific. So, I know AI consists of a variety of areas in machine learning, natural language processing, predictive analytics. Can you tell us a little bit more of a definition on which of those or what combination of AI subcomponents are being used in marketing and PR? And if you can just give us a little bit more on definitions.
Yeah, although to be honest, even though you're asking me about definitions, I'm going to try not to bore the audience with excessive definitions, because the reality is it doesn't matter. What really matters is how it impacts the business, how you can best leverage it to get improved outcomes. And AI in general, machine learning in general, is this phenomenal of analyzing data, predicting data. So when it comes to marketing and PR, it's all about understanding clusters, pricing, elasticity, demand, supply, analyzing transactions, and so on. But the reality is that what's been exploding lately and what everybody tuning in probably wants to hear, it's about this generative AI, the Gen AI, everything that was triggered by ChatGPT. And even though everybody utilizes OpenAI, is by far not the only one. There's ChatGPT, there's Google Gemini and Microsoft Copilot, Anthropic Claude, a whole bunch of open source ones like Llama, Mistral, Myriad, and so on. So everybody lately, at least, is curious about how does all this really impacts my business. And it's been impacting marketing and PR substantially, although, let me paraphrase that. It has the ability to impact it substantially. It has, at scale, it has impacted very little so far, but its ability to analyze data at scale is the interface for the users to really be able to ask the right questions, get the right insights, as well as on the gen side, the generative side, produce the right content, whether content is documentation, written content, imagery, video, audio. It's massively impacting the space on marketing and PR, the space on sales, and therefore impacting pretty much every single company that I know.
Real interesting. Yeah. So it comes down to how you leverage it, not so much, which one or the other. It's, really, I would imagine.
I mean, whether you know that you're utilizing a specific area of deep learning within machine learning is irrelevant. It's important that you know that you can utilize a series of things from AI. And actually, let's utilize a campaign journey or a go-to-market journey just to illustrate it. You can automate market research, consuming a whole bunch of documentations, websites, articles, blogs, podcasts, videos, and be able to really internalize, analyze, correlate, and extract insights. You can utilize it for media monitoring. Now, AI is not scraping the entire internet live very well yet, although it's coming. But at the moment, if you have the ability to feed AI the data, then monitor media and give you more than just views, likes, engagements, but actually highlight what type of audience, what did they do, why did they do it, what is the relevance, how contextually can you utilize it, where's the insight. It does extremely well on going super deep in areas that it would usually take a lot of time. Within the same space, reputation management. A lot of people want to know what's really happening around the reputation, crisis management. Then you start moving to content creation and optimization. This is a big one because content creation, every company and media in general has been moving from this mass market to mass personalization. As a matter of fact, funny enough, that was the key campaign for McDonald's when I was there during the transformation, mass market to mass personalization. Mass personalization has always been nirvana. It's been a dream because it takes too much time, effort, resource, and cost to really produce individualized content on a one-to-one basis. And that is until now. Cost has been drastically dropping. The ability to understand each individual is rapidly accelerating, and the ability to produce content that's really going to trigger relevance on a one-to-one basis is now, for the first time in history, very much possible. And with that, and then the last need is just campaign optimization. So another thing that AI does really well is just consume massive amount of data and is able to quickly identify what's doing well, what's not doing well, why, to whom, which message resonates, which part of the message, which part of the imagery, which part of the creative, why does it resonate, what problem is it solving, which one is not working, how can we optimize it, and analyzing a whole bunch of inputs, a whole bunch of outputs, and at the end of the day, optimizing your precious dollars on everything that you do on the sales and marketing side.
Got it. Yeah. So there's a few different areas right here on how you're applying it, and obviously in traditional marketing, PR, and whatnot, you're testing, you're A/B testing, and you get analytics, and that kind of helps you figure out what's working, what's not. But you guys are really looking into even deeper insights, right? And so curious on how strategies for marketing and PR have changed because of those deeper insights. Like, do you have some kind of narrative or whatnot that we can kind of highlight as like maybe a case study?
The key thing that I advocate is the speed. So what AI does, to your point, what a lot of technology in general, it allows you to do more with less. That's by the definition, technology through the ends of time, since we invented the fire and the wheel, is we can do more with less. AI, similarly, we can do more with less. But what that's really changing in the area of sales and marketing and PR is just the speed to market. So for instance, traditionally, if you're going to launch a new product, let's say that you have a new token you want to take to market or a new real world asset, and you want to launch something new, you had to go through cycles of market research, understanding personas, understanding investors, understanding buyers, understanding who's interested, understanding why, and customizing messages, testing, iterating, and doing all that before spending significant money. So it just added a lot of this prep and planning time, which, again, I never advise to do anything without prep and planning. But what AI does allow you to do is massively accelerate what used to take months to days or even hours. So the ability to, you mentioned A/B test, the ability to take something to market and actually maybe even call it brute force a whole bunch of different messages to different audiences, to different capabilities, to try to mix and match and find the right appeal. You can do that extremely quickly, which now, instead of spending weeks or months and hundreds of thousands of dollars on user research, you can just take something to market in a matter of days and make sure that you optimize it to the nth degree.
Got it. And that's a great segue into the main meat and potatoes of the conversation here, which is how AI can be leveraged in the tokenization space. I think you did a great job at kind of illustrating on how it helps, leading up. But I think it's something else that we want to touch on is, how AI can help measure market demand for some of these assets. Tokenized assets at the end of the day represent traditional finance, real estate, equity, debt. But there is something to be said about measuring the demand for some of those assets and what's meant to come on chain. So is there anything that you can share on, testing market demand for digital assets and the like, and sentiment around it?
I mean, listen, on this one specifically, the answer is AI is not a silver bullet. It's not magic. It's not going to give you anything that traditionally you'd never had access to. What I can tell you is that each individual asset and each issuer and each company has a different thesis and a different methodology, a different framework on how they operate. And what AI does extremely well is AI can learn a lot of that. It can scale it, and at the end of the day, it can do it better than we can. So if let's give you, I don't know, real estate asset in Miami, specifically high-end condos that were built less than 30 years as a specific hypothesis for demand. You can, if that was specific, if somebody had a hypothesis they want to talk in a specific condo conversion, for example, how do you determine the demand for that? It's all about getting access to the data and feeding the data to an AI that can analyze it, process it, get the insights, and ultimately bring some intelligence a lot faster, better than we can. So what AI can do better than we can do is real-time monitoring of the market, real-time monitoring of conversations, getting deeper. And you mentioned sentiment, and sentiment is one angle. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of detail beyond the sentiment, which is the why are they talking about what they're talking? Is it when they're saying, for example, there's, I don't know. Actually, I'll give you real good stuff. New York media publishes articles and it says There is too much development and too much supply in Miami, right? So therefore, an investor will think if there's too much supply in Miami, it perhaps is a risky investment, a risky asset, because the offset's not going to be as good. The demand is, there's too much supply, saturated, limited demand. And even though there's been significant demand during COVID, it's slowing down and people are going back to work, back to other cities. But then you feed this into a system that can see census, and they can see there's more than 1,000 new people immigrating to Miami every day. And Miami, South Florida, let's call it that way. There's 18,000 condominiums for sale, but out of those 18,000, if you start slicing and dicing the data, 15,000 of those are 30 years and older. And there's a specific correlation to some new laws that are getting passed that they're going to jack up the assessments. So the demand for newer condominiums is massive and the supply is low. So now you start narrowing down into individual specific opportunities. Then where are they located? Are they close to the beach? Are they close to a center? Are they close to good schools? So on a lot of the, zone conversions or condo conversions or, rezoning, you have to really understand areas. And this is more data for developers, but then for anybody looking to tokenize something like that, they have to really understand and predict the demand. And you start getting into, out of the 3,000, there's actually less than 1,000 within specific areas and less than 100 within the top elite areas. So there is not enough supply to fulfill all the demand that's coming, which is going to cause price increase. And then you start correlating other things. You start correlating you start correlating different market effects and pattern recognition. So what happens when interest rates rise and interest rate lowers? Again, things that we do all the time, but once you have the data to really try to correlate, well, this type of a 25% basis points drop on an interest rate typically affects the market as a whole this way, but it affects these specific areas on a complete different way. So market recognition, market correlation, and I can go on and on forever. And then when it comes to digital assets, on top of that, there's all the chain analytics, wallet analytics, identify whale movements, and all these things to try to build signals and predict market movements, which will indicate, you can predict a lot of demand, but not just demand in general, but very, very specifically to the type of assets that you're trying to market. Again, I'll pause there because I can go for an hour just on this topic alone.
No, that's really, really exciting stuff. And the fact that you can look at all this segment and then, segment the data and then apply something else to it to really generate those insights, I think is really cool. That being said, a lot of people watching this may not know exactly how to go about it, right? So it seems great. Do you have any recommendations on maybe I don't know, let's say someone has the data on hand and they're like, well, where do I put it? Any recommendations on tools to use, or if you find your own tool, how to prompt or how to, what does that use look like?
That will require a few hours masterminds deep dive session over here. So unfortunately, no. I will tell you that instead of, before you answer what to do, I'll possibly answer you what not to do. What not to do is go and feed OpenAI all your proprietary data, your secret sauce, and ask OpenAI to start analyzing it. And the reality is, as much as there's very hidden checkboxes that says that OpenAI shouldn't utilize your data to train their models, I don't know if I can guarantee that your data will never make the light of day. Once it's out there, it's out there. So there are other tools and other models that you can run locally, but then at that point, you need a lot more, technology knowledge and IT infrastructure and experts. The shortcut is hire a consultant. Hire somebody that's an expert on AI that can help with your specific use case. Build an infrastructure, build a framework, build your own stack where you can load your own data. But then you mentioned somebody has some data. The reality is that the biggest opportunity is to marry your data with additional external data. So there's tons of data, depending on the use case, on trying to understand market trends and market signals. And being able to sift through all this data is a massive advantage of utilizing this type of tools.
Very cool, and definitely a good note. Not necessarily working with OpenAI there.
Yeah. I mean, I use, again, just if you are to use some of the top ones. Funny enough, within the community, it's very well known which one performs better. And even though every week there's a new tool coming out, if I had to recommend a tool as a general best of breed, utilize it for me and my day-to-day, my go-to tool better than OpenAI is a tool called Claude from Anthropic. So every single day, that's my go-to tool. I benchmarked it against OpenAI, I benchmarked it against Llama, I benchmarked it against Mistral, against Gemini, against Copilot. And personally, I like it the best. I like it best for analysis. And I also like it the best for composition. The quality of the output and the quality of the messaging, the quality of the insights, the quality of the content that comes out of it is significantly better than some of the rest.
Good to know. We'll definitely be looking at it ourselves. There's some of the audience too, so jot down notes, guys. Friendly reminder: I know a good amount of people have joined since last time, so please go ahead. Like I said, submit any questions you have, and we'll get to them as we move along here. Rob, I think you touched on a great point, right? We just covered on figuring out a market demand and testing that and so forth. And that's great for maybe like an issuer. Another problem that issuers have, before I get to maybe the service providers, the other side of the coin here. Issuers are also looking for liquidity and distribution. That's not part of the reason, but it is part of the reason, kind of, that they're tokenizing assets. They want to reach a broader audience aside from maybe their traditional channels. And so I wanted to ask, how AI can be leveraged to identifying and reaching those potential investors that are the best fit for those assets. And some things that we consider even on a consulting side, just to give a little bit more context, is jurisdiction. It's what kinds of investors, retail or accredited or qualified. Right. It's the asset class itself and if it makes sense for them. And of course, a slew of other things. So I want to ask, what your thoughts are on that and reaching the right target audience there.
My thought is that AI is primo for sales marketing and sales automation. As a matter of fact, we utilize that extensively for this. Now, I'm not going to tell you I'm the regulatory and jurisdiction expert and regulatory expert when it comes to what you can or cannot say. So we'll touch on that in a second. But that aside, AI, there's been a myriad of tools popping up that are called AI SDR, Sales Development Rep, or BDR, Business Development Rep. And even though none of them are extremely good yet, but they're coming out quickly. But what AI can do extremely well, and now I'm telling you, extremely well, is build a prospect list in the database. Going out and doing research on each one of those prospects, whether it's institutional, whether it's a high net worth individual, a family office, an investor, a private equity, or an individual. Understanding institutions' portfolios, understanding their investment thesis and hypotheses, understanding sectors, understanding prior portfolios, understanding prior portfolio performance and exits, understanding connections, understanding relations with each other, understanding timings of investments. And then you can have AI do all this massive research on each one of these, let's call it prospect database. Then you can also have AI really killing it on let's put it this way. It's cold outreach. If you don't know all these investors and you want to reach out to them to offer a specific type of asset, it's a cold outreach. But as opposed to the old cold outreach, which is very spam and get caught and has low deliverability, and it looks like just a template that you bought a database list of 100,000, private equity investors. This one shows, at least it mimics a lot of the research that you would have done if you had done this yourself on a one-to-one basis. So when you reach out with a contextual relevance. And that relevance triggers open rates, which right now, I'm telling you, we're hitting 70+% open rates on everything that we reach out cold, which is incredible with 30% conversions. So the ability to go out and reach out is utilizing this for sales automation, sales outreach is the primo top use for AI for most companies that I've seen, and including us. Now, when it comes to regulatory compliance, it's an interesting one because you can, now the good thing is that you can teach AI to be compliant. So for example, if you're doing a Reg D, you can tell AI what 506 restrictions are. You can tell AI what verification requirements are. You can tell AI what a solicitation violation is. You can tell AI what an accredited investor is. And when you go to general, you can tell it what the disclaimers are, what the prohibited languages is. You can be very specific around jurisdiction. So you can actually, one, it probably already knows a lot of the stuff out of the box. Two, you can teach it. And then last but not least, you can stack different agents. Now I'm using agents for the first time, and I'll tell you more about them in a second. But you can stack different agents side to side. So an agent is doing the research, another agent is doing a lot of the writing and outreach, another agent is checking for compliance. And the compliance agent is actually quickly making sure that the marketing and outreach agent doesn't go out of compliance. It doesn't do anything that's that's illegal. So you can have AI check your own compliance, by the way. So if you have people going out and doing a lot of outreach, and you want to make sure that they don't go out of bounds when it comes to verification and communication restrictions at 506C and B and all that, you can have an AI filter and check all your outreach, but you can also have it check your own AI outreach, which is really, really interesting.
Wow.
So what's happening right now is that there's a big shift. I mean, possibly most of you don't read AI newsletters and AI sites all the time, but what's been trending lately, what I can tell you, is this notion of agents, which is the not evolution, but is the next step after having a chat interface or an interactive interface and a generative interface to an agent, which is a self-contained bot that can work autonomously with a specific purpose, with all the tools, capabilities, and functions that you can get with an open AI. So you can imagine you have an instance that all it does is doing research on the firms that you want to do research on. You have another instance that all it does, it writes very relevant emails. You have an instance that all it does is checks for compliance. So these instances or these agents are going to slowly start augmenting business functions, and to be honest, at some point replacing business functions, especially on the smaller and startup companies.
Wow. So you're essentially like interconnecting different agents here to do different tasks, but they kind of build on each other, which is really cool. I think that's awesome, and so that's really cool on the sense of staying compliant. I know that we would have used it very much so when we did a Reg CF a couple of years ago, and I think you could probably look it up. We submitted like 400 pages worth of screenshots of every single.
So to give you an idea, stuff that, again, openly speaking, stuff that I do on a daily basis. There's databases out there where you can get certain type of companies or data or lists. You can actually, without going super specific, like venture capital, private equity, family office, let's go very generic. LinkedIn. Everybody here and everybody on the call has LinkedIn. Some of you may have LinkedIn Sales Navigator, some of you may not, but at the end of the day, you have the ability to do certain type of searches. So let's say that you want to search all the family offices, but then you want to search family offices with assets under management that are at least, I don't know, let's call it 50 million, but not greater than 500 million for your specific target. So you can start pulling all that data into a database from LinkedIn. Then you can go and you can do your research on who's the GP and who's the investor, who's the sign-off, who's the decision maker within that specific family office. And then you can go and start saying, well, what has this person been posting lately? What has the family office invested on? What are the specific asset classes and verticals? And you can, like I said, you can start going very deep, building your segmentation and hypothesis before you start reaching out to them. So the ability to go very deep with significant abundance data and significant relevance is again is life-changing, and that's a new technology, let's call it. This level of automation has exploded and it's become available this year. By next year, we're going to start seeing a lot of these agents coming to market. So a lot of companies are going to start releasing more general purpose agents within sales, within marketing, within research, you can have within your own company, you can have an agent for market research. You can have an agent for reputations management. You can have an agent for investor relations. I mean, there's all kinds of different things that you can start automating. But at the moment, it's all about how do you architect it? How do you build it? How do you get the data? How you put it together? How do you stay compliant when you do it? And then and the general state is not everybody, a lot of companies have done a POC, a proof of concept. They've tested the waters. But then the question is, how do you really put this into production? How do you make sure that it doesn't go out of rails? How do you put in the governance on top of these tools that you don't know if they're going to violate some regulations and get you in trouble? So the guardrails are also very important, which is, again, where I say you really need to get somebody.
I think I lost audio there.
Oh, I can hear you.
1 sec.
Okay. Let's give you a second.
There we go. We're back.
We're back? Okay.
Yep.
All right. So to summarize it, I was saying the reality is most companies can do a proof of concepts and can test the water themselves. When it comes to really applying and building a robust AI ecosystem and apply it to the organization, definitely, find a company like a GPR or another company that knows how to do it, ask for help, and you're going to see exponential returns for that specific investment.
Absolutely. And AGPR being Amsterdam Group, they're people that we work with at security token market and whatnot. They do a lot of good stuff and have their toes deep in the Web3 space. So understanding how this works, while specializing in marketing and PR. I know you advise them from time to time, Rob. So obviously, it's helpful to have an expert on hand that can help out whenever it's kind of needed there. So that makes sense to me. Shifting focus over to the service providers, though. So the issuers are being helped here by AI by being able to target the right audiences for distribution, by generating a variety of versions of, like, call it an ad or messaging and so forth, while still tracking to make sure that they're being as compliant as possible, depending on what legal framework they're under. Service providers have a different set of issues that could be solved by AI. And one of them is figuring out, well, as we're determining more assets to come on chain and more different potential issuers that want to use those service providers, AI, I would imagine, could also be used to do research on that, right? On finding people that might be ready to be an issuer. And so not so much the asset to your earlier example, like the real estate part, but more so figuring out, well, who is primed to have, a fund that should be tokenized. Is that something that AI could look at in terms of, identifying those?
That area, I'm less of an expert on, but I can tell you that to the extent that this expertise sits in-house somewhere, it can be taught to AI, and AI can, one, automate a lot of this analysis. But second, and what always ends up happening is that because it can go so much deeper and look at so many additional variables and build additional correlations, it will find some insights that typically will have never been able to be found by any individual. Completely unrelated to assets and tokenization, but I also advise companies on the bioinformatics space. They're doing drug development. So drug development at the molecular level, by designing new proteins, enzymes, antibodies, and so on. So when you start looking at the applications of a protein on a ligand, which let's not get super deep, but at the end of the day, you design some molecule that has to attach itself to another molecule in the body and have some type of effect. And most of the pharma companies spend years and an average of $2.4 billion doing that. Because there's a lot of trial and error, and there's a hypothesis, and you have to test it out. The ability to tell AI, well, now test that, but test that with everything else that I haven't thought of, and try to find other applications that I never even dreamt of, and find me adverse effects that I'm not even testing for because they're so unrelated in my view. So the ability to do all these different things with all the data that it possesses, just it's incredible. It brings value to every given industry. So I'm giving that example as just to get you guys thinking into, yes, you can have AI try to mimic your existing business process and your existing research as a service provider to try to build and test a hypothesis. But once you do that, and if you open the Pandora's box, you can have it go and look at so many other things and bring back some insights that you never even dreamt possible.
Makes sense to me. And everyone obviously is an expert in their own field, depending on, what they're doing and how long they've been doing it. But I would imagine, obviously everyone can leverage that expertise, to your point, to train the right AI to do what you need, and filter in the right parameters and so forth. Which also brings me to challenges in using and navigating AI. I know that you just mentioned a great anecdote there, right, where AI will have insights more than maybe a human could even come up with, or at least figure them out a lot faster. But with that said, how do you balance AI results versus human input when you start finalizing, marketing material or documents or whatever the case may be? How do you start balancing the result versus human input?
Yeah, so as much as I've been praising AI on this call, I also want to make sure that I put out there that the head of AI for Northeastern University describes ChatGPT as a stochastic parrot, which means stochastic just means random, and parrot means it repeats what it sees and repeats what it learns. We're not anywhere near of super intelligence. We're not anywhere near of what's called AGI, artificial general intelligence. These AI systems are not smarter than us yet. Now, they can pass the bar test. They can do a lot of really, really amazing, interesting things, yes. But with that said, one, it's not creative. Every creativity that you see is, at the end of the day, a regurgitation of something that has learned in the past. It does not understand and has not been trained yet on emotions and sympathy and empathy. So when it comes to marketing, like the question that you mentioned over there, at least right now, there is massive expertise on agencies and marketers that understand brand, understand emotions, understand consumer impact on many different levels, understand responses that AI doesn't have yet. Now, I do envision us training AI on a whole bunch of different things like this in the future, and they may start replacing and augmenting people. But at the moment, when it comes to marketing and creativity, adverts, imagery, at the end of the day, you definitely need people oversight. When it comes to challenges, the other piece that you have seen out there, commonly denominated as hallucination. Now, it's funny. The industry calls it hallucination because you ask something and it starts making up stuff. But like I said, I mean, in the eye and the eyes of the AI, it's not making up stuff, because LLMs and OpenAI and ChatGPT, the reality is they're not smart. They really don't know anything. They're utilizing a massive database to generate answers on the fly and try to make sure that those answers are relevant to the questions or the prompt that you put in there. But the reality is that you wouldn't know. It's not capable enough. So there are systems right now that are starting to combine the capabilities of Gen AI with knowledge graphs and with something called RAG, which is regenerative augmented retrieval, which is to to combine it with real data and real databases to make sure that you only have real answers. But the challenge is, back to generically, is you have to take what AI says and what AI responds with a grain of salt, because it may be true, or it may be tweaked, or it may be completely made up, depending how you're prompting and how you interface with it.
That makes sense, right? I've had my experience with ChatGPT just to test it out, and I asked it something in the tokenization space, and it gave me an decent answer, but the numbers that it come up with, I tried linking out to whatever source it was, and the link wouldn't work, or I wouldn't be able to search Google for the same type of results. So to your point, it has some ways to go, but I will give it credit where it's due, where at least it inspires ideas, or it inspires a new way of thinking.
Again, and that's when you use it out of the box. The reality is that you can set up prompts to massively reduce this type of hallucinations.
Mm-hmm.
You can set up systems in addition to prompts to even further reduce it. And again, at the moment, they already are being implemented within HR departments within companies. Therefore, they cannot afford mistakes. Mm-hmm. It's been implemented within logistic departments. It hasn't been implemented within law firms, to the best of my knowledge. It's been implemented significantly within financial services. So as you can imagine, there is no room for errors when it comes to this type of implementations.
Right.
So there are ways around it. But again, you asked about usually general challenges, is that out of the box, you're not going to get it to perform the way you want it to perform.
Yeah, you really got to customize it a little bit.
Yeah, you got to be cognizant of that. But then you have to understand that done properly, it can really, really impact your business.
Fantastic. And I guess it kind of segues into the next one, which is somewhat related, but if you have any best practices or advice on working with multiple AI tools, you mentioned that obviously creating different instances and whatnot, but the output of one might be the input of another. I don't know, but you let us know, what would you say best practices are?
It really is. And I mean, the reality is that there's always a right tool for the job, and it may not be the same tool. So even within text generation, it might not be the same one. So for example, it has nothing to do with this industry, but for example, AI has the ability to generate text. Yes. Part of that text can actually be coding. So it can help developers and coders actually do their job. Now, some AIs are better at coding than others. Some AIs are better at marketing than others. Some AIs are better at text analysis than others. And then you have your other different content types, whether it's image, and then some AIs are better at photography, and some AIs are better at illustrations. Videos, there's about 4 that are really good at certain type of video, but you have to figure out which one does what. So like you said, and it's a very evolving and it's going to ever evolve space. Now, to connect them all with each other, that's interesting. And it can be either done at, let's call it low level, which is hire developer that's usually writing Python and building some type of AI pipeline for you. And by the way, let's take a step back. The AI integration into other tools doesn't have to be into other AI tools. So for example, when you asked earlier about sales automation and marketing, it has to be integrated into the company's CRM system, for example. How you're tracking your leads, where's your customer database, where's your customer relationship management and database, how you're tracking emails and calls and text messages. So ideally, it integrates into all these things, integrate into your social media, integrate into your LinkedIn, integrate into your website. So there's integration in general, not just system to system. There are some tools out there to do this, what's called on a low code or no code basis. I don't expect many people here to go out and start to do it, but There's tools like Make, there's tools like N8N, there's tools like Visual Prompt. There's quite a few tools out there to do integration. I mean, if I had to endorse one, I like one called N8N the best. But at the end of the day, that's very specific to build integrations and custom pipelines on different tools. And it is a way to start. In the future, when we start seeing more agents and custom agents, I can totally see some of the people on this call wanting an agent that all it does is whatever chain analysis and signals. We can build an agent that ultimately integrates into some of the chain analytics, integrates the data, writes a few analysis, produces some outputs and insights, puts it on a PowerPoint, puts it on an email, sends it as a daily summary to everybody, to every executive in the team. So there's a lot of things that we could fully automate, and some of these tools are really good for that.
That's a really exciting really exciting situation to be in, I think, and where you can leverage it and how it all connects, because those things are done manually right now by someone, and so you can make their job a little easier. You can streamline them. They open up bandwidth to work on something else.
If you ask, again, well, let's not get political, but at least pre-election until last week, most of the companies were on a semi-recession, and there was been tons of layoffs. And if you looked at typical announcements, companies are going through rounds of layoffs, either because they have to or preventively because they're going to have to. So what I've been hearing the most, and just triggered a thought because of what you mentioned over there, is companies are not always looking at AI for new capabilities. At the moment, what I'm hearing the most is companies are looking at AI for business optimization and cost savings. And that's what I expect that most of 2025. I mean, there's going to be an innovative part of the market, like I said, drug development and pharma and healthcare, that they're going to start innovating. But for the vast majority of the businesses, it's all about how can we optimize our business processes? How can we automate some of the repetitive tasks? How can we improve on those repetitive tasks to get better outcome and free up our people to start doing more and more?
Makes sense, right? And eventually, they'll leverage it for other stuff too. But this sounds like, the go-to use case here. Who doesn't like who doesn't like efficiencies? And that's part of what tokenization solves on the financial side, but AI also on others operational things too. If
you are hearing this and you're wondering, because the next question that I will ask is, so AI is going to take my job? Right? So if you are hearing this and your question is AI going to take my job? The general answer is no, AI is not going to take a job, but somebody using AI will. So you got to make sure to get proficient, to learn, to start figuring out how to apply it for better optimization and better performance on your day-to-day basis. Whether it's something as simple as summarizing a meeting and send out follow-up notes, or to keep your tasks management up to date, or to read and do research faster, whatever it is, somebody who's proficient at utilizing AI to go through their day-to-day will certainly be a better candidate for jobs or higher paying jobs than somebody without it. So general advice, not for the business owners, but for everybody else that's possibly listening to.
That makes sense to me. For me, I would hire someone that's a little bit more well-versed in modern tech than someone that's maybe not. Anyone that really, that the idea at the end of the day is you want anyone on your team to be as efficient as possible, that has that proactive type of mindset and learning and being entrepreneurial and finding new ways of doing things. So no, totally get that. Rob, on the flip side, though, something else in challenges is, and you kind of touched on it too earlier when you told us, not to take things with a grain, to take things with a grain of salt. But are there any other ethical considerations to keep in mind when you're using AI driven tools, especially, in the workplace?
I'm pretty sure they are. The reality is that I wouldn't pinpoint a lot of them to AI, but more into the underlying data. So, what
Mhm.
is fair use of data? What is fair use of privacy? I mean, you asked earlier, what can we do to do better outreach and find investors and improve liquidity pools and so on. There's AI is just a tool in the toolbox that can take a whole bunch of data, utilize it better, and find ways to, I mean, not even exploit it, but just find ways to optimize it towards a specific outcome. The the ethical challenges will come into the underlying data, so making sure that it's safe, it's private, it's confidential, that you're not building another Cambridge Analytica, that it wasn't so much that they utilize data to influence voter behavior, is that the data that they got were not legally acquired.
Mm.
So that's one consideration. The other is, again, it's so easy to utilize generative AI for constructing content. So the other piece, again, in general, that we're going to start seeing, I don't know how much it applies to this industry, but it applies everywhere, is the veracy of some of the content, to know which content is original and which content was I don't know, deep fake or fake news or generated by AI just to manipulate certain type of target markets or audiences. So we will see tons of additional content, everything from imagery to videos, that it's indistinguishable from the truth. So you're not going to know if a person actually said that or did that. To, I don't know, I was on a call earlier today with academia. And again, they're building AI for detecting fraudulent academic papers because they're so well written that you don't even know if it's actually a real academic paper or just something that was made up on the fly by AI with some completely mismanaged information.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. No,
So
yeah.
that's it. So the ethical consideration is that it's going to get easier and easier to generate anything that you can imagine. So just make sure that you stick to your moral compass and your ethical boundaries on what type of content you're generating and what you're using it for.
That makes sense to me, especially where you get your data from, and do you have the right to use it? Obviously, is very important, and also not you're keeping in mind that the outputs you need to still reflect reality, right? So, and making sure that there's no weird messaging or that the AI created that is, especially when you're dealing with securities, by the way, that could mislead any investor. So, definitely things to consider on that end.
Exactly, because you can easily make up a lot of stuff that sounds real, and you can actually make up stuff to back up that stuff and put it out there. So you can literally construct an entire microcosm of an alternate reality, and it's not hard to do. So it's just making sure that you're utilizing this properly.
Makes sense to me. Awesome. Well, we're almost at time here, Rob. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you think is very important for the audience to get insight on?
I mean, no, but the final advice is just get your toes wet, get in the game, test it out. It could be overwhelming. Most companies are on a holding pattern, standby pattern, looking from the sidelines pattern. Now, there's a lot of innovation happening within the space. I wouldn't advise anybody to go out and do something like build their own large language model. I wouldn't advise anybody to fine-tune a language model. I wouldn't even advise anybody to train their model with additional data quite yet, because it could get really complicated and really quickly. But I would advise anybody to start figuring out where can you add value, and this is not a project like whenever everybody's doing now 2025 budget saying we're gonna get this much efficiency by the end of the year. No, this is something like, if I'm on a board of any given company, I tell them, how can you start applying some AI to get double-digit efficiencies by the end of Q1? So try to get a sense of urgency, because the world is moving fast, and as a multiple time digital disruption executive, the general notion is disrupt yourself or somebody else will. So no industry is safe. Every industry will get disrupted. So just making sure that you're in the game, you're experimenting, and you're seeing what you can do, and not what you can do eventually, is what you can do today.
Makes sense. Absolutely. And actually, for anyone watching that does, we want to be proactive and learn this stuff. Do you have any recommendations on like tools or videos to watch, channels that you follow, stuff to get familiar, from an elementary standpoint?
I chuckle here because I wouldn't know on the elementary side. I'm unfortunately way past that point. The content,
Fair enough.
the content, and it's not bragging about myself. I mean, it's just that I really don't consume that type of content. I do stay,
or just in general, what would you use, I guess, to reference and
yeah, exactly. I'll try to figure out what's the most basic use of some type of AI tools, and we touched about it today. I mean, if any given company, if I had to tell everybody, you go out and you start doing this, is start figuring out how to improve sales in general utilizing AI. Because the reality, there's not a company in the world, doesn't matter which industry you're at, that couldn't benefit from a better pipeline and more sales.
Absolutely.
And this is a very generic area where AI can do significant, can benefit you on prospect building, research automation, audiences and segmentations, getting deeper into personalized messaging, outreach, CRM in general, relationships in general. Like even I cannot tell you how many people, even once they open a prospect and a lead, all of a sudden it goes cold because they haven't followed up and it falls off the radar, they forget. So AI can automate a lot of this. Let's make sure we follow up in 2 months because of this. So let's make sure we keep an eye until there's a specific launch or regulation. Yeah, so let's make sure that we keep an eye into there's certain announcements in media or PR. So we keep an eye into this project closes, or they sell this company, or whatever it is that's happening. This is where, I mean, it can make a massive difference. It can double your sales by next year if you do this properly. And I will strongly advise everybody to start getting into that. And on that one, if you do need advice, just reach out. I don't think I have any contact in here, but just find me on LinkedIn, I guess. And I'm more than happy to give a hand on that side.
Sounds great. Awesome. Well, Rob, thank you so much. I think this was really valuable, really good and get to understand, where things lie in AI. Obviously, it's a broad space and you have the expertise to, guide us in the right direction and understanding its potential, how it's being used, how it can be used eventually. I think this was really great. For everyone watching, keep in mind that this is a webinar that will be accessible afterwards. And so you can send it to anyone that you think that it would be applicable on. Highly recommend, following Rob and his work, as well as learning about AI as we kind of stressed throughout the webinar today. It could be useful in issuances, in generation, as well as.
And if somebody has follow-up questions, Jason, is it better to put them on the comments on YouTube, or where should they go with additional follow-up questions?
Yeah, go ahead and submit them to me at jason@stm.co, or go ahead and give them the comments and I'll forward them over to Rob. Unless, Rob, you want to share your email, although totally your call.
Yeah, totally fine. Yeah, actually, my email is public out there. It's rob@robgonda.com. That's the one that I read the most. Everybody can reach me there. No problem. You can reach out directly.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Rob. I appreciate it.
All right. It was a pleasure being here, Jason. I'll see you soon.
Talk soon.